noticed that a few people have actually unmuted themselves and we're getting some noise in the background. So if I can just remind everybody to mute themselves, that would be great. So welcome everybody on this Tuesday morning to another one of our women's sessions here. We're very excited this morning to have three incredible speakers with us. One you may all recognize, Carrie Kirkman. We did have back a few years ago at our Women's Symposium, and she was absolutely fantastic. So welcome. Hello, Carrie. Thank you for joining us again. My name is Jennifer Rashti. I'm the Senior Director of Partnerships and Community Relations with the Vaughan Chamber. And I will be introducing our chair this morning on behalf of our President and CEO, Brian Schiffman, who unfortunately had already booked some vacation and he was not able to change it, although he did try. And he did want me to send in his huge congratulations to the Women's Committee and huge thank you to all of our speakers for joining us, as he was not able to be here, but he does say hello to everybody. So anyways, I guess I will start off by introducing you to Isabella. For all of those who don't know her, Isabella is the chair of our Women's Committee, a good friend of mine, a wonderful member here at the Chamber. She is the founder and chief client strategist at Bertani, and she has been leading our women's events now, I think it's over 3 years, right, Isabella? Am I right?
Yeah, I think closer to 4, but.
This is our 4th year, so thank you again. She's also the sponsor of today's session. So a huge thank you to Isabella for always supporting us, and she really was organized all today's speakers and put all this together. So Isabella, thank you from everyone at the Chamber. I'll turn it over to you now, and you can talk a little bit about fashion and COVID-19.
Thanks, Jennifer, for that kind introduction, and welcome everyone to our second virtual event for 2020. It's our new reality. Many of you, I'm sure, joined our Women in Health session a little over a month ago, and we really wanted to really put a spotlight on areas that women are interested, but also areas that are being hit hard through the pandemic. So before I start, I introduced our three panelists. You know, as Jennifer mentioned, just a reminder that we will be taking questions via the chat room after our panel discussion. So please feel free to use that forum to type in your questions throughout the discussion, and I will make sure that I bring those to our speakers' attention. And please, make sure you keep your microphones on mute. So I'm delighted to, and also thank you very much also again to Carrie, who was very instrumental in helping organize this event as well. So I'm delighted to introduce our three speakers. Alison Coville is a Canadian retail leader and former president of Hudson's Bay, having held various roles, senior executive roles over 20 years at HBC. She was an integral part of the revitalization and growth of this iconic brand. Drawing on her extensive experience in merchandising, marketing, store operations, and financial expertise, Alison brings strategic oversight and insights that benefit to the bottom line. In a highly competitive and ever-changing industry, she has done it all with a strong sense of urgency balanced with a long-term view of where the business is going. Definitely strengths needed during this critical time. Our second panelist is Mary Turner. Mary is the president of Designer Brands Canada Operations. She leads the retail banners, the Shoe Company, DSW Canada, and the Shoe Warehouse with 141 stores. Prior to joining Town Shoes Limited, Mary spent the bulk of her career with Hudson's Bay Company, where she was very involved in the repositioning of Hudson's Bay, specifically the relaunch of the Room and the designer business, as well as having worked at Holt Renfrew in a variety of merchandising roles. Mary holds her BA from the University of Toronto and Trinity College. And finally, and last but not least, Carrie Kirkman is president of Kirkman Consulting, a boutique consulting practice that offers small and medium-sized businesses strategic support and advisory services as they look to scale. With almost 3 decades of retail and wholesale experience, Carrie has established herself as a leader in the fashion industry in Canada. Prior to launching Kirkman Consulting, Carrie held various top leadership roles, including President and Chief Merchant at Sears Canada, President of the Jones Group Canada, as well as Interim President of Nine West Canada. So welcome, ladies. I am absolutely delighted to have the 3 of you together for this discussion. As I mentioned, we are a committee representing a Chamber of Commerce, and we want to focus on industries that are hardest hit in this pandemic, as that will reflect those members. And the industry of fashion, being one of the biggest industries in the world, is also the most vulnerable because of its discretionary nature. And it has definitely been hit across the value chain as an industry as a whole, but also for the people within it that work, from the designers to the manufacturers, to the supply chain and logistics, and right down to the retailers. Before we start, just some fast facts that I did through my preliminary research. Globally, prior to the pandemic, according to McKinsey, the fashion industry generated $2.5 trillion in annual revenue. Just in Canada, between the months of March and April, as a result of COVID, revenues dropped 30% in the retail sector. And that includes all aspects of retail, including some that were considered essential services that were allowed to stay open. So the impact to actually the fashion industry was significantly more. I wanted to start, Alison, with Alison with my first question, that with these months of lockdown across the industry, it's been said that the fashion industry needs to rethink how it operates. And certainly when the dust settles, we're going to be facing recessionary market and a slowdown in spending. From your experience working at a large department store, what are you looking to see from a short run perspective from companies in order to stabilize and survive?
Wow, big question to start off
I know, I wrote it out and I thought, my God, this is the whole talk in one question. So.
Okay, well, look, you know what? I think we'd all agree that every business, whether it's retail, CPG, direct to consumer, whatever sector you're in, they're looking to reposition their business for success post-pandemic. And it's going to take Herculean efforts in strategy and innovation, connecting with your customer in a really different way. And so it really doesn't matter what business you're in. I think, or how you touch retail from our listeners today, it's going to take some real sort of thought processes that are going to be different. I think that we would all agree as well that the crisis kind of brought the future crashing into the present quite harshly. And so I think, there's no one that would be surprised to say that retail was facing its own challenges pre-COVID. Look, the realities of some of those headwinds that were forcing us to change. So, the digitalization, the growth of e-commerce, pressures on wage, the minimum wage changes, the cost of doing business in digital, is more expensive than driving sales in brick and mortar. So I think there was a lot of things that were already impacting retail pre-COVID. And I do believe that those retailers who were strong heading into March, the ones that had a really strong point of view, who were already, invested in digital, had great relationships with their customers. Think about the Lululemons and the Aritzias of the world, that they will continue to be strong. I think, unfortunately, the ones in the middle that were, maybe not positioned that well, maybe didn't have a real point of differentiation, will probably weaken. And then we've seen the evidence that those that were weak will likely disappear. And so that changing landscape, when you bring it back to Canada, look, I was working for the very last true department store in Canada. So we've seen it happen. And so I think it was a big wake-up call. So, I mean, the question around what do you do first, I think is what you're asking. And, you know, where do you look as a retailer? What should you be focused on? I think that the first thing I'd be doing was really making sure that you were looking at the strategies within your organization, but doing it on multiple time horizons. What do I need to do now? What's that going to look like 12 to 18 months from now? What's that going to look like 3 years from now? And the obvious things around revenue generation and operations and digital, with that lens, what does that look like going forward? And then, you know, I think there's 2 or 3 things that I would say that you know, probably should prioritize and focus on. Know your customer now. Her behaviors are changing, that's a reality. So what does she need now? And I mean know her not as a data point, but truly as that customer. Nancy living in Vaughan with 2 teenage kids who loves yoga. What's she looking for now? She wants that level of personalization. She wants you to know her. Doubling down on digital obviously is really important. You know, reimagining that physical network of your stores. We've all heard that. Brick and mortar is not going away. It's just really, what are we going to do differently with that space? And how do you make it become part of the full experience? And then, you know, putting investments into that digital, if nothing else, you know, whether that's around analytics or productivity or taking cost out, double down on those things that are around digital. And then really, probably lastly, looking at your supply chain. I think a lot of retailers, every business felt that, boy, when the crisis hit, were they really prepared from a supply chain point of view? And I know Carrie's been doing work on that with some of her clients. And I think it's important now, and it was an opportunity now to step back and say, what did I learn from this, and what would I change? So those would be the things, you know, they're kind of obvious, but I think if you were going to prioritize, get your organization really rallied around those 4 or 5 things.
Do you want to weigh in from your perspective from, I mean, you're representing really one type of, I guess we can describe it, commodity, shoes. So how as a chain or retailer, how would you view that differently?
I actually very much agree with what Alison said. I think it's relevant to every industry. And I think particularly the piece around strategy over different time frames, timelines. I think people must not be afraid to what might seem in their mind to be changing their strategy, because we have to adapt to these extremely unusual circumstances. And certainly speaking for our organization, you know, we had a very clear strategy that we were in the process of implementing, and COVID made us realize that it's a great long-term strategy. It's not the right shorter-term strategy, and we weren't afraid to pivot and get on with that. So I would really encourage people to be thinking about agility right now, and be very aware of their long-term goals, but know that sometimes the short-term has to change to support them.
That's a good point. In terms of the being agility and being able to be flexible, because we are in a very volatile time. Carrie, you represent things from a different viewpoint, from the wholesaler and the distribution side. How does this impact what you're seeing?
In so many ways, in almost every way. But I would say if I was going to give advice to smaller businesses, small to medium-sized businesses, number one would be become absolutely obsessed with your customer. Obsessed, like to a degree that you've never experienced before. And second, really be selective with your business partners. Understand who is in a position to support you, and who is invested also in your success. I think during really critical times, it's going to be, I mean, your partners are going to be the difference between success and failure. Nobody, even in good times, can be successful alone, but especially when times are challenging, understand what brands you're partnering with in all aspects of your business, and think carefully about, number one, how they're showing up during difficult times, and and how they are invested in your success as a business owner as well. So completely agree, obviously, with what Alison and Mary said, which is really a very thoughtful, structured way of approaching the business. From a wholesale point of view, you know, you can reverse it and say, who are the retail partners who have demonstrated the desire to want to work with you? Because if we're only talking to ourselves in our own bubble, we're not really creating any strength or synergies either. So this works on both sides, right? Is strong communication and understand who are the people that you want to make the commitment to, and then work hard to figure out ways to solve issues as they come up.
So, but to that end, with that, you know, you mentioned working with your partners, and it kind of brings me into my next question, because this is such a broad industry, from, you know, designers to, you know, the people that are sewing to the, you know, the manufacturers, that supply chain that you're representing, the retailers. How does this industry as a whole coordinate? Is it possible to coordinate to really bring stabilization across the industry? I know that's another crazy question.
Okay, so briefly, I think anything is possible. We don't have a specific voice that speaks on behalf of all parts of our industry. We have advocacy organizations. We have a retail council. But in terms of who really has strong teeth, who really has the muscle to be able to operate, I don't think that we currently, I mean, I'll be interested to see what Alison or Mary have to say about this, but I don't think there exists a single organization that is looking to facilitate some kind of coordinated change management for the industry. I think that it tends to be leaders of each part of the industry, hopefully working together where it makes sense in order to drive change. So, and that's, I would say, very consistent when we think about labor laws and when we think about sourcing compliances and different things. It tended to be driven by a small group of impactful leaders who made decisions to set certain standards, and then that became sort of a guiding path for the industry. But
I think you're right.
Mary
I
Ellen?
mean, I think you're right. Is there one governing body? Look, we were talking about together just before the call came, and you know, this is a crisis like we haven't seen, this sort of economic structural break that no one has experienced of our generation since World War II. And so for us to have that crystal ball, which we know as retailers we'd all love to have, on trends and fashion, what's happening, we need it more than ever. And we know that's not reality. But I think the coming together and the learning, because there isn't anyone who has all the answers. And this notion around, Mary talked about it, the pivoting. I think the more that you can test, you're not going to have all the answers. Take what knowledge you do have, use your intuition as, you know, lifelong learners of retail, and do things differently, and then share those experiences. You know, you have your own networks. This Vaughan Chamber is a great example. How do you create a platform for operators and people to come together and share what's happening? Because I think that, to Carrie's point, is going to be the true answer until, you know, unless there's really major things that we're trying to change as an industry. I think it's really going to rely on all of us to be more community-based and sharing.
Mary, do you want to add something?
Yes, I would just say the other thing that we were chatting about just before the panel started was the fact that now more than ever, we need our fellow retailers. You know, for those of you who operate, for example, in the Vaughan Mills Shopping Center, where I have 2 stores, our store, particularly our DSW store, as you know, has a direct entrance. So it should be a place that people are quite comfortable to go and shop at because they can get in and get out. But the reality is it's been really, really tough going in Vaughan because so few of the other stores are open. We need more than ever all of our retail partners in whatever center we're in or whatever strip of the high street we're on. And I think now more than ever, the opportunity for those retailers to come together, whether they're competitors or not, and you know, generate ideas and generate activity and generate, you know, things that are going to come to the benefit of all is absolutely crucial at this time.
I think I think that's such an amazing point also, because often retailers historically have worked in kind of, how do I build a moat around my business and try and protect it and guard it, and you can't have this brand, and I can't share any information because somebody's going to steal my customer. Independent boutiques are like, I hate brands that have their own direct-to-consumer website because you're stealing my customer. I think that my learning from this is that we have to change, sweep clean that mindset and understand that each business individually has to have its own value proposition. It has to have its proper reason to be there. And then the strength is going to be in collaboration. And if we look at most disruptive businesses, they've been the ones most welcoming of collaboration. Whether it's, weird, completely offbeat products that can work together. But I think the whole "it takes a village," we're in a window now where no one isolated model anywhere is going to be the winner. And that's not to say you're not being competitive and that you're not looking to be successful or any of those things. But I think looking internally and understanding what you bring to the table and maximizing that strength versus being so concerned with all the distractions and the white noise around you is not going to be the way the new retail world is going to be successful. So it's a big mindset shift, I think, for a lot of people who have operated in a different way for a long time.
Mary, I wanted to just, looking in terms of that mindset shift, that, one quote I read was from Anna Wintour, where she said that she feels people's values are really going to have shifted as a result of the pandemic. And how do you see consumer behavior changing, and how is that going to impact how people are doing business, how retailers are then going to be doing business?
Well, certainly we saw a huge shift over the COVID period, and we don't actually see it shifting back now that we're coming slowly out of COVID period. I think obviously the two huge shifts were how she was shopping, obviously totally online and now continuing to be very invested in online, but also what she was buying. That the shift in the business was huge for us, specifically in the footwear business, where it became entirely about athleisure and things to wear around the house. And every single footwear retailer out there has been scrambling to build their assortment based on those lines, whether that was their core competence before or not. So, and then outside of footwear, clearly she was buying things that complemented the COVID lifestyle, whether it was things for the home, because all of a sudden we're all home and realize what we have or we don't have for our house to make us comfortable, and or buying things to keep our children occupied, and or fitness equipment. I don't know if any of you are in the fitness business, but you could not buy fitness equipment in Canada or the United States about 3 weeks into COVID because everybody was getting themselves set up to do their gym at home. So huge shifts. And I honestly, Anna Wintour was obviously talking more about higher values, but from a behavior perspective, I don't see people veering away from those things anytime soon. I think the other thing that we certainly noticed was the power of the brand during this time. People really wanted to shop brands they knew and trusted. So, where there might have been more of an interest in private brand in the past, I think right now the customer is very, very focused on brands they recognize and know that they're going to get the value of. I do think from a true values perspective, though, that this has to have started people thinking about, the good of the planet, and we've certainly seen in the footwear business that people are very interested in footwear brands that are working on sustainable materials, on the ability to be able to wash and be germ repellent and all of those kinds of things. So I think there's a big shift in that direction as well.
Carrie, did you want to add something from the viewpoint of the consumer? How about fast fashion? Like, I mean, in our last talk, we talked about, newness buys, purchase behavior. But, I'm wondering if that, with people being so concerned about, what's going on and, saving money, are they going to be as attracted to that, buy and throw away after a couple of times? And even from a manufacturer or distribution, are we going to be seeing the number of seasons, et cetera, that we did before?
So I still very much believe that if one of the secrets, whether you're running your own website or you have a bricks and mortar store, is you want customers to come more than once. Right? You're in a business. It's not you're not just trying to get them to have a dentist visit. So you really want to be engaging and building a relationship. At the end of the day, a relationship is built by having something fresh as a reason for somebody to come in. Now, how much you buy and how much you overbuy, which, became a bit of a model, that's obviously the challenge. And different channels of distribution have different issues with this. For example, independent boutiques tend to think of pretty much, I have a spring season and I have a fall season, and don't really look at it as a month by month flow of inventory. Now, I still believe that having you might have your initial inventory ship, but you still have to have newness coming in on a regular basis. Otherwise, if they didn't like what you had in February, they're not liking it more because it's May, right? You're looking to try and encourage them to be engaged. So the structural model of our business, in that sense, I don't see changing. What I think will change is this idea of disposable clothing. And I think that was where we were talking before. Clothing that doesn't last, doesn't wash and wear well, is really almost like changing a lipstick, right? I have a dinner, I want a cute top, done. I'm young and I'm going to a club and I want to have something new, done. And the idea is almost the cost of the evening's entertainment versus this idea of quality and building a wardrobe that really has more value in every sense. We're certainly hoping that this fast forwards that move. And, that change, obviously that means spending more per item, but hopefully recognizing the value that item now actually costs you. I always use the analogy cost per wear. I've been able to justify a lot of very expensive purchases by my cost per wear model. But honestly, if you think about it, some things that you think are cheap are actually incredibly costly, either because you never wear them or you wear them once or twice. And really, what did that cost you? So it's a different way of thinking. And I apologize for that.
Reality of Zoom panels.
And I've actually, and I'm back. Okay, sorry. That's wonderful.
I was gonna say that I'm glad I'm not the only one that looks at cost per wear. I've rationalized so many Escada suits because of the cost per wear.
Sorry. And the other thing I just wanted to highlight, sorry, before I pass this on to the other ladies is, oh my God. Okay. Is this idea of the resale market in general, so that even when people are spending money, if they do want to exchange, if you buy better quality, you actually can get money back for what you've spent, versus anything that's in that lower end. You better buy it and wear it out because ultimately it has no other intrinsic value. So it's the shift in thinking has actually created this amazing opportunity also for new segments of the business with resale, et cetera, coming up.
Alison, how do you think that this, just, to add to that, how does this whole shift change the product itself in terms of what we're going to be seeing?
Look, again, I keep going back to pre-COVID times, and there was already a wave. We heard it, where luxury designers were already talking about, the need to change. It's just sort of cut out that superfluous aspect of what was happening in the industry, the number of shows and Paris Fashion Weeks and this constant cost of, you know, convincing the consumer that they needed more and more and more. And Armani was one of the early ones who came out and said, okay, this is enough, as did, you know, Saint Laurent, the House of Saint Laurent, canceled fashion weeks for the balance of the year, obviously not knowing at the time that that would happen anyway. But I think this notion, and it's not a new one, we've all been talking about it, especially all of us who've been in the industry in retail for so many years, buy now, wear now. And we talked about that, and it was probably in, you know, in sort of around 2014, where it was really the shift in the industry that said, okay, why are we sending bathing suits and flip-flops in November? Because this very small segment of the population was going to Ibiza, you know, versus the rest of the world who was looking for cashmere and sweaters and down-filled coats. So we saw that shift. So I think that's what we're going to start to see. I don't think it's revolutionary. I don't think, like a lot of things, it's just taken some notions and things that we were all working on and brought them crashing into the present. And so I think, you know, Carrie's point of newness is what the customer buys. It doesn't matter how you stack up the data, newness is what flies out first. So finding that balance of creating newness through fashion basics and looking for value in the fact that it's easy to wear and I know I can pull it out again in the next season and the next season. I think those are the trends that are sticky, and we're going to have to find ways to convince her or him that this is new and it's fresh and it's exciting. And there's some retailers who do that in a really great way and do it only on digital. Think of, you know, Everlane. You know, how more basic can you get in a t-shirt, but they make you feel like, boy, I don't think I have that one. So I think that'll be part of what we see go forward. And I would just say that probably the silver lining, I keep saying that there's silver linings of this pandemic and the hibernation and isolation, is that it's allowed the industry at every level to step back and say, okay, let's take a pause and think about what is really important. Back to Carrie's point of really know your customer. What's driving their behavior now and into the future? And so this ability to be able to stop and just say, you know, this is our chance to fix retail. So let's not waste a really good crisis, as Einstein would say.
And then that brings me, and I just found out, I apologize, you guys aren't seeing me, you're seeing my model me, so I'm sorry.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure why that's happened. I do these all the time and I've never had a problem, but today it seems to be a problem, but that's okay. My model me looks better than the real me, real me these days. So, you know, that, Alison, you know, what you were mentioning before, it brings me to my next question, and is that, you know, social distancing has really highlighted that importance of the digital channels more than ever. And how is this going to impact, you know, the relevancy of a retail store, but how consumers are doing business? You've alluded to a little bit of that already, but maybe if you want to expand on that, because I think that'll help our smaller retailers that are on the line as well.
I guess my one point, and you know, Mary obviously has a lot of experience most recently on this, but I would say probably one of the big shifts where, you know, creating that experience in the brick and mortar is still super important and more so than ever. So how do you bring that, you know, innovation and experience and community to your brick and mortar? But I think one of the things that has probably popped up into the top 5 of the most important things to be focused on is how do you turn that experience into something from a safety perspective. So, you know, the Safe Acts, where it used to be really about what does that user experience need to look like, really convincing your consumer that you've done everything you can to make her safe. And I think that social distancing, you know, now it's been prescribed for us, you know, through our government agencies, but go forward, what responsibility as retailers are we going to take to ensure that this is about the future and that this probably likely is not going away? And so how do you make sure that your customers are going to feel safe, and how do you incorporate that into your brand and into the experience so that it doesn't just feel like you walked into the waiting room of a hospital?
Carrie, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, and then I
Yeah.
think, yeah, sorry,
Oh,
Mary.
sorry. Go ahead, Mary.
No.
I was just going to say that I think what we've learned through this period is that our stores are an absolutely critical part of the e-com chain. Customers love to order online, but would much prefer to return to a store, pick up from a store. We're very fortunate that with our almost 150 stores now actually across the country, we can be pretty close to where our customers live. And it's a huge benefit for us to have that network. We're a somewhat unusual retailer, at least as a larger retailer, in that we fulfill 100% from our stores. We actually don't have a warehouse where orders are fulfilled from. So what was wonderful for us through the pandemic was we were able to keep quite a significant number of our associates employed and happily working, obviously very socially distanced, but fulfilling orders. But what we really learned through the pandemic was people desperately miss the ability to drop off a return at a store, drop into a store to ask a question, all of those things. And one of the things that we've spent a lot of time on post-pandemic is how can we be better equipped to assist people with as little contact as possible, but still letting them come to the store. So we're just in the process of rolling out our ability to transact at the curbside. So people can either drop off or pick up, but not have to come into the store. We're just now having the ability to make people much more aware of the individual store phone number, so they can call and ask questions and actually work through quite a lot of what they want to accomplish, and then just run into the store to get it. It's really a return to very old and traditional retailing, whereby you were kind of walking up to a desk and being assisted at a desk, not wandering all over a store looking. It's funny how much we changed to actually go back to the past.
Yeah,
Love
That's
it.
what I would say. Carrie, how about you?
Yeah, I would, in regards to the digital piece, the e-com piece, and how critical that is now, so many independent retailers still have not really gone direct to consumer and are still operating out of their shop front. And I would just say that, if you've been hesitating, if you've been dabbling but not really all in, this is the time to chase that really hard. Between your own social media and building that out and building a customer base and building the communication, and then setting up, like Shopify just partnered, now offering free website setup, and I think a year's free operating costs with all kinds of consulting support, so that a small retailer would be able to get themselves up and running. And I would just say it's one of those things, just do it, right? Stop thinking about it, stop worrying about it, and just do it. Iterate and learn as you go, but start going. And I think that is going to be a deal breaker. If ever there's a time where a small independent retailer actually has an edge, it's now. Like, there's been so many years when it's been under such pressure and such threat from all the big guys who kind of were able to dominate the market. Now it actually owns a niche that speaks to safer, more, it's a much more comforting environment for somebody to go into. It's in their neighborhood. They may know the owner. All of those things really speak to an opportunity right now to take advantage of that. But in order to survive, and I believe, like, you're probably talking for the next couple of years that there's still going to be very dramatic change. You need more than one revenue stream for your business. You cannot make yourself vulnerable by only having one way of transacting. So, take the time now and just get it done. So that would be my biggest wish.
And I think you brought up a good point, in part of the things you were saying, that, the local retailer, the local shop can take advantage of the fact people are looking to buy locally these days. They want to support the stores in their neighborhood, in their town and city. So you do have a bit of an advantage and can step into these challenges, as Carrie said. We have about 15 minutes.
I would just add,
sorry,
just
yes,
as
of course. Go ahead.
No, just because I've been reading about this more recently, and just sort of idea generation, but these, for these small independent boutiques or retailers, there's this real move to bring your community into your store. And so thinking about your box and how do you leverage that? Do you lend it out to book clubs? Do you lend it out to organizations within your community to use that space when you're not? This is the time to acquire new customers. Everything you read now says their eyeballs are everywhere, and so when they have that need to get out into the stores, and you can make it feel safe, and then at the same time be part of that community and giving back, I think is going to be absolutely critical and could actually be one of the game changers. So really thinking about those partnerships and collaborations, and not in your traditional retail sense, but really thinking out there, how do I get those customers, those groups into my environment.
Great, thank you. I just want to let our audience know we've got about 15 minutes left. If you've got some questions, please put them into the chat, because I'm going to, as I see them come up, I'm going to read them. I've got a couple of questions left, so we'll continue speaking. But if you've got a question you want to ask from the viewpoint of running your own business, here's an opportunity with 3 leaders in this industry that can answer your questions. So type those into the chat. If you don't know where that is, it's at the bottom of your screen. You see chat there, and just type in your question there, and we can, I'll read them out to our speakers. So, I'll start with a question. How does each of you, and this is another big giant question that I put together, I really need to rethink my questions when I'm putting them together, because they are very broad. But, from each of you, how do you see, given what's happened, how do you see the industry, and you've alluded to some of this a little bit, how do you see the industry evolving in the next 2, 3, 4 years? You've talked about it, but maybe bring up sort of your one key point, each of you. Alison, let's start with you.
Oh,
Yeah, Alison.
everyone knows to tell me not to just say one point, because then I can't think of anything. No, I would say the things that, that we're talking about being sticky and that aren't going away. It's interesting. I heard the things like the health and wellness craze, everybody cooking at home. There's a sense that may not stick, that may not become the new norm. But the things that will, this buying digitally, so the growth of that, so can't reiterate more, the doubling down on investing in digital. I think what will also stick is, brand loyalty. So think about your brand and the brands that you perhaps carry in your stores. Carrie alluded to this, really prioritize those, because I think that's going to stick. And then the other thing I think was happening, again, we already saw that wave, but there's a whole generation out there who is not seeking brands. They are waiting for the brands to seek them. So the platforms you're on, the way that you're marketing to those customers really has to be about that personalization. And I think that's just become even more evident because they're spending more time online. And so the expectation now is that you know me and that you're going to create content or you're going to have things in your store that are specific to me. So I'd say those are a couple of things that are really going to stick and that we should all prioritize for sure.
Mary?
I think that all industries, but we're talking about retail, is definitely going to be much leaner for at least the next 3 to 5 years to come. I think we all had to send people home during COVID, and clearly I don't think anybody's going to be in a position to bring 100% of their people back as the economy continues to struggle to normalize itself. And I think we all learned how to get everything, but no work went away. In fact, in many ways, the pandemic caused more work. And somehow we figured out how to get that work done smarter with a smaller cadre of people. And I don't see that changing. I think it also forced us to become far, far more creative. And I hope that we can hang on to that spark of creativity as we continue to rise to new challenges. And I also think that we are much smarter. And I hope we stay smarter. And lastly, but not least, I think over the next 3 years, and all three of us have said this, but I truly believe we will be much, much more closely connected with our customer, whoever she is, and for whatever reason. And that actually just leads me back very, very briefly to one point from the prior discussion, which is the other big shift we've seen is the whole geographic shift. Think of how many times you did your purchasing around where you worked, whether it was services, whether it was purchases, whether it was food shopping, whatever. Well, now you're not going to work, or at least many of us are not going to work. So all of a sudden you are back in your own neighborhood, supporting local people, supporting local therapists, supporting, hair salons, supporting local stores, definitely supporting local grocery. And I think it's important that we think about that fact and think, are we actually marketing to the right people? Are we marketing to the people right around us versus attempting to get people to come from miles and miles away when they don't need to or don't have any other reason to be doing that? So I think that's my story.
Yeah. That's great.
Okay. Carrie, did you want to add one last, and then we'll go to questions?
Yeah, sure. I would just say that to me, something that I think has been incredibly amplified and has become so apparent to everybody, even though, you could say this as well, we know this, but the human connection and our need for authentic connection, how much we miss really authentic connection, how much we miss some kind of physical interaction in order to get energy. And I think brands and businesses need to really think about the way they communicate. They need to think about how honestly they're communicating, the authenticity behind the communication, because it is to a great degree standing in a much larger way than it would in our regular life before COVID. So brands that have been able to resonate in a much more honest way, I think are also winning. So it's just another sort of facet or dimension to consider, that the canned or highly polished or, very clever but very antiseptic way that a lot of very polished marketing was done in the past really is just not firing the same way. And you can see that also through who's disrupting, whether you think of Knix, underwear or whatever. This is real people feeling like they are speaking, the brand speaking to me. It's not just purely aspirational and so hard to understand. It should be inspirational, but I think that element of super aspirational, I think that in a lot of businesses that could be tempered back. And I think there's a bigger opportunity to make more meaningful connections than that in today's world.
Great, thank you. Our questions just started popping up the minute I asked. So we've got quite a few questions. I'm going to actually start from a question from one of our lone men in the audience. We've got a couple of them, but we'll start with one of them who I know. So Carrie, the question is, Carrie, you mentioned the need to obsess about the consumer. How can retailers retain employee loyalty in the face of this uncertainty?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question, because obviously a retailer, your people are your brand's expression, right? That's your business. How they're going to respond to customers and represent your business is your business. So I think it starts with, again, a focus on empathy. It focuses on respect. I think it's hard when a business owner feels under enormous financial pressure, which very few businesses are not in that place right now. And most people, when they're under pressure, don't flex necessarily in the most positive, thoughtful way that typically brings their fight or flight kind of behavior. But I would say to understand that in order to retain and have consistency, people need to feel respected, they need to feel heard, they need to be brought in to the challenges, but empowered in the ways they can best support. So don't put the work in on, or the pressure on a person who has no ability to deal or help with that area, but for the things that they can do, empower them, communicate well. And I think that that's such a human desire, right? I want to be heard, I want to be seen, I want to feel respected, and I want to feel safe. So I think if you can honestly provide that for your people, if somebody doesn't then embrace that environment, they may not have had enough work experience to appreciate how rare that is. Sometimes they need to have a couple of bad experiences to appreciate what you're offering. But I think that's where I would say would be the starting point.
I'm going to go to the next question, and Alison, I'll direct this one to you. And it's relevant in terms of what's been happening recently in the news. It's just in terms of the question was that there's a designer, Aurora James, who has a designer out of New York, Brother Vales, who's begun an initiative called the 15% challenge, where the organizers believe that retailers need to have at least 15% Black-owned businesses on the retail floor. So your opinion on that, and I'm sure that's possible. What is the industry doing to
anything's
support that?
possible. Yeah. You're right, Isabel. And I think, inclusivity and diversity is something clearly that organizations have been focused on, but in my opinion, haven't done very well. And I think they don't do well, not because it isn't spoken about and because they don't care about it or passionate about it. It's because they don't put the KPIs against it. They don't ground it with performance. And so I think whether it is this initiative, the notion that it's the 15% challenge, it's not saying 50% or 80%, it's giving a challenge out there that is measurable. So I think just in the fact that it started there is a positive one. But I do think that change is not going to happen until, as I said, it's measured in a really meaningful way, and that CEOs and presidents and owners of businesses really believe in that change. And therefore hold themselves and the organization accountable. And look, at the end of the day, we need to give a platform and we need to give opportunity to those brands, and then know that the consumer will decide, and they will make the choice. And I see some of the other questions around Canadian manufacturing. I think it falls in some of the same vein around, look, we want to support local, but it has to be something where the customer is prepared to pay for it, that it's sustainable. Being Canadian isn't necessarily a competitive advantage, but it is when it's coupled with great experience and great product and great service. And then to be able to say, and we carry Canadian brands, or we carry brands that are designed by incredible, Black women and men. I think the consumer will weigh in and decide.
Thank you. Mary, this is more of a comment, but I think it's sort of extending from what you had talked about the importance of brand and durability. And the comment is basically, demand is increasing for high quality and durable classic fashions. Buy less, buy best. Attention should be given to build individual personalities of buyers who are willing to pay for product which are well made and can endure. Do you want to add to that in terms of how you see that evolving with the buyers, matching the attention to the buyer's personality?
I completely agree that what we've seen through this period is that when you think that people might actually be very saving and very careful of their money, in fact, they have preferred to buy the better product, brands that they trust. Birkenstock has had an unbelievable success through this period. And I think it's really important that we are focused on the brands that really matter to our customers and understand what they are and when they are prepared to pay and when they aren't prepared to pay, and build strong relationships with those partners.
Just, we haven't, kind of to expand and really to all three of you, where we've got a couple of minutes left, but I think this is an important question from the viewpoint of our retailers. So I'll let each of you answer this question. Is you speak of meaningful connections and really how can you make it meaningful that we're connecting virtually when that's the most predominant way to connect with people. So how do you create that meaningful get to know your client? Mary.
Can I answer that one quickly to start off with, just because it's something I'm quite passionate about? Just almost, we don't even know how this happened, but exactly. But during the period when we were completely closed and only able to transact online, I think we had decided, it must have been Easter weekend, that just for fun and for surprise and delight to our customers, for every pair of kids' shoes we shipped out, we had Play-Doh that we were selling in the store, Silly Putty in the stores, and it was incredibly popular when people were able to come in and buy it. So we said, let's just put a little package of Silly Putty in with each pair of kids' shoes, and just a little note, say, hope you have fun with this. You cannot imagine the response we got. Can't imagine. And then we thought, okay, well then, what next should we do a little note about? Maybe we do a note for Father's Day. We'll do a note for Mother's Day. We'll just have a little note thanking you for shopping with us in a way that reflects our brand personality. It has been, I cannot tell you the feedback I've had. So there's always ways to connect.
Alison, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's exciting, Mary, and it kind of brings us back to the days when many of us started out in retail, and we talked about, I don't think we called it the experience, but it was really around creating theater. Do you remember those days? Everything was about creating theater, and I think it's back to those grassroots things, and that's kind of, again, I talked about the silver lining. I think that's one of the silver linings today, is that it's going to allow us to go back to those grassroots kind of initiatives and think of things that are just fun and easy, and do them quickly and move on and don't overthink them. But I do think there is a reality of creating that, kind of loyalty and commitment from an online perspective, and that gets a lot harder. So I think that is where you're really going to have to think about how do you invest in that analytics to understand your customer, perhaps, or really think about the digital platforms you're marketing on so that you can get data back to really understand and create that personal relationship. So it's going to be a bit harder, but there's lots of things out there, webinars online. You have sales associates in your stores who are experts. How do you create little video chats on your website that talks about the new products or what's exciting and new? Create that interaction. So again, they don't have to be, super global ideas. They can be really easy connection kind of things that you can do quite easily, I think.
Carrie, I'm going to let you have the final word on this question, and then I have so many more things I want to ask, but we're running out of time. But I'll let you weigh in on this last thing.
Well, I think I love Mary's story. I think that's a perfect example. So I have two things I'd want to say. One is, I'll forever remember I ended up signing up for one of those meat delivery services during COVID because I couldn't, get to a grocery store. And if I sent my husband out as the hunter-gatherer to risk the elements, he would go, and half the time what we'd want wasn't there. Anyway, first time I got the delivery was a handwritten note saying, Carrie, we think you're awesome. Thank you so much for signing up to support our business. So that, even if I didn't like the product, I think I would stick with these guys because it was such a surprise to see the note. Anyway, so that was one thing. It doesn't take a lot, right, to really surprise and delight. The second thing would be pay attention to your customer service. If you're on digital and somebody's got a problem and they're contacting you to resolve the problem, guess how many customers you lose just through that interaction. So there's a lot of the front stuff we talk about, but all that work is thrown in the garbage if you're not personalizing and empowering and training the people who handle the problems on the back end, because that's actually where you build the relationships and the loyalty. Anyway, I'm sorry, I know we're over 11.
That's okay. So I wanted to thank all of you, Mary, Alison, Carrie, for joining us. I appreciate taking time out of your schedules and really giving some insightful information to our audience at the Vaughan Chambers. So thanks, everyone. We will be continuing these talks throughout the rest of the year and with further topics, and we hope you'll join us at the next one. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, Isabella, for having us, and Jennifer.
Yes, thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Mary.
Good luck, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Stay safe.
Thank you.